Hamburg, New York, is a small, peaceful town with about 60,000 residents. Many families chose to settle here, including the Wells family. Larry Wells Jr., or just Larry to his friends, was married to Jill, and they had a 4-year-old daughter named Maddie. Excitingly, they had just learned that Jill was expecting another girl. Larry and Jill had been sweethearts since high school. They met at 15 and soon started dating. They even went to college together, where Larry studied to become a teacher. He loved working with children, and after earning his master's degree, began working as a substitute teacher and mentor. Jill remembered how Larry always supported kids who had tough home lives, making sure they felt safe and happy at school. Unfortunately, due to the tough economy, no school could offer Larry a permanent job, so he had to work temporarily. This was a challenge for the family, since they wanted to buy a house and provide stability for their growing family. Larry knew he needed to find a more secure job to make this dream come true. A little deflated but undeterred, Larry began job hunting and soon started working his way up the retail management ladder. He found a position he thought would suit him perfectly at Toys R Us, where he could blend his love for toys, gaming, and gadgets with his joy of working with children. When his local Toys R Us was looking for a new assistant manager, Larry applied and got the job. It was a different pace than what he was used to, but he handled the long hours, overnight shifts, and weekend and holiday work in stride. He loved seeing children run through the doors, dragging their parents by the arms and pointing down the aisles at all the toys. With a 4-year-old daughter himself, it made him happy. When not at work, Larry enjoyed taking Maddie to Chuck E. Cheese's or having long walks on the beach with Jill, savoring the simple things in life. On the morning of June 29, 2013, the Hamburg Toys R Us was set to experience one of its busiest mornings, with new lines coming in and a large delivery expected. On such days, the store would open as early as 1 a.m. and stay open until closing time. Larry was scheduled to manage the delivery shift. He woke up at around 3 a.m. and arrived at the store by 4 a.m. to let the delivery driver in. By 4:30 a.m., the delivery driver was done unloading and left through the back door, and Larry continued with his morning duties. Just before 5 a.m., employees Richard and Anthony arrived to start their shifts. Finding no response from Larry on the radio, Richard walked around the building and discovered an open door, which was surprising as all exterior doors were always locked. He clocked in and entered the store along with co-workers Isaac and Cindy. Assuming Larry was busy with the delivery or on a call, they proceeded with their work. However, a few minutes later, the store alarm started to go off. Cindy went to find Larry, annoyed by the noise, only to discover him slumped in his chair, bleeding heavily from his chest. It appeared to be a gunshot wound. Fearing a gunman might still be in the building, the employees ran out, and a frantic Cindy called 911. The police arrived quickly, prepared for a potential standoff, but found no one else inside. They discovered Larry barely alive with 3 stab wounds to his chest, not gunshot wounds as initially thought. Tragically, Larry succumbed to his injuries before reaching the hospital. The SWAT team confirmed that the perpetrator was no longer in the building. The incident was shocking, especially in a town like Hamburg, known for its low crime rate. Journalists and detectives speculated whether Larry had accidentally unlocked the door for an intruder, or if someone with a key had done it. Larry had no known enemies or disgruntled employees, making the motive unclear. Investigating the office, the police found that nothing seemed out of place, and it didn't appear that anything had been stolen. However, they noticed the main cable for the CCTV system had been pulled out. Additionally, a 2007 University of Florida gator cap, which seemed out of place, was found on the floor with a lot of DNA, providing a potential lead. The 4 employees present at Toys R Us during the incident were immediately brought in for questioning. The police were on the fence with everyone. Isaac was nervous under investigation, and Richard had arrived late to work with no alibi for where he was before. Cindy had been the first to find Larry, and Anthony actually refused to answer any questions, which seemed odd. Believing that the baseball cap was a key part of finding Larry's killer, They took DNA swabs from all 4 of Larry's co-workers to compare to it. It was confirmed that the same DNA on the hat was also a match to the DNA found on the cable, which had been pulled to stop the camera's recording. However, this DNA was not on the police's file. This noon, police are hoping someone's going to come forward to help catch the killer who attacked a man at a Toys R Us in Hamburg. News 4 Anthony Coney is live with the very latest on this investigation. Well, Diana, the Toys R Us did reopen this morning. It was the first time since the assistant manager was stabbed to death inside the store on Saturday. Police continued to search for evidence outside the Toys R Us Monday morning, more than 2 days later. No arrests have been made for the murder of 35-year-old Lawrence Wells. While police have not yet made any arrests, they do have a key piece of evidence: a 2007 Florida Gator Championship hat left behind by the suspect. Police will be testing the hat's contents for DNA, but hope the hat may jog someone's memory. The funeral for Larry Wells will be held this coming Thursday in Forestville. Police are asking anyone with information to please give them a call. We hope to have much more on the investigation coming up tonight on News 4. Jill said as heartbroken as she was, the support that was coming in for her and Maddie via social media was so lovely and overwhelming. Toys R Us employees nationwide, as well as people with no connection to Larry at all, were sending their love, and reading all the nice things that people had to say was putting a smile on her face. The Facebook page had almost 3,000 supporters in just a few days. The head of loss prevention for the region was Bernard Greer, who went by Bernie, and he was soon called into the store by head office. He was ready to help the police with the cameras and check over the building. He was a frequent face in that particular Toys R Us, and Larry knew him well. The camera showed that at around 4:20 a.m., someone had been lurking outside the front door for a few minutes before getting inside. It was unclear whether they had forced the door open or unlocked it. They entered the store in dark clothing, covering their face. Experts felt confident that it was a man, but apart from the hat, there was nothing they could make out. They had done a good job of concealing themselves, and the camera quality was poor at best. Larry's killer started moving quickly through the aisles, zigzagging around. He was careful to avoid some of the cameras, and he was hard to keep track of. On one camera, though, they could make out him wearing the same cap that was left in the office, and he was carrying a huge knife in his right hand. At 4:32 a.m., the person moved into the office. The door was open, and Larry was not inside. 7 minutes later, at 4:39 a.m., all the cameras stopped recording. This was the moment the cable had been pulled out. There were no cameras inside the office either. Larry entered just after this and walked right into his killer. They stood there looking at the black screens, helpless with no clue as to where to look next. Bernie burst into tears, telling officers that Larry was more than a colleague. He was a friend of 6 years. Bernie had even been the one to interview and hire him. Detectives could definitely say one thing with certainty now. They were sure the suspect knew the store's layout before he went in. It seemed so unlikely that a random intruder would risk doing something like that with all the lights in the store on, knowing that there had to be people inside working. Investigators had taken DNA from dozens of employees at this point and hadn't gotten a match to anyone. Despite the initial feelings and possible suspicions they had about the 4 people working there that morning, through DNA testing, they totally ruled out Richard, Anthony, Isaac, and Cindy. They had lost their boss and friend and found him dying. What happened unsettled all of them, so it was no wonder they were nervous and didn't really want to talk. Good evening. 1 month has now come and gone since a brutal toy store murder, and tonight family and friends are still desperately seeking answers. Despite surveillance pictures, a hefty reward, and desperate pleas from family members, his killer remains on the run. Authorities were hitting a wall. Though it was good that they were ruling people out, they weren't adding any suspects to the list, and things were coming to a grinding halt. It had now been 3 months since Larry was killed, and Jill, along with the police, were worrying that it might not get solved. Police in Hamburg were scared that someone could not only have gotten away with murder, but were still out there walking the streets. Jill said all she could do was sit by the phone and wait. Larry's 36th birthday came and went, And then there were all the holidays coming up. Larry loved dressing up with Maddie for Halloween. Then it would be Thanksgiving and then Christmas. All of these things she had to help their 4-year-old through as well, who didn't really understand what was going on. Then Jill would be having her second baby without her husband by her side. It was a very vulnerable and scary time for her. The murder remains a mystery, but tonight family and friends are rallying to support the family left behind. Rachel, this is the biggest benefit that the family of Larry Wells has had so far. All of the proceeds will go to support Wells's wife, his daughter, and their unborn child. More than 400 people have bought tickets to tonight's benefit for the family of Larry Wells, bringing the total raised so far to over $10,000. We have hundreds of volunteers, donations, baskets. It's just been amazing. It's overwhelming. But I think for Jill and for Maddie and our little baby on the way, I certainly think that this is a wonderful event. Hamburg police are still looking for Wells's killer, the man seen in these grainy surveillance photos from inside Toys R Us. Their best piece of evidence remains this 2007 Florida Gator National Championship baseball cap. The suspect was wearing a ball cap that he left behind, and police were testing it for DNA evidence while also trying to enhance the surveillance photos. Despite these efforts, the suspect still has not been caught. If you have any information about him or the murder of Larry Wells, you are asked to contact Hamburg police at 648-5111. Reporting live in Lacana, Rachel Kingston, News 4 at 6. Police, desperate for more resources, enlisted the help of the FBI. They realized they were missing a DNA swab from someone who had been around the store a lot and had been helping with the investigation from the start. 38-year-old Bernie Greer, the regional loss prevention manager. They noted that Bernie had avoided participating in the DNA test several times, often for silly reasons. When police called Bernie again, he said he would comply, but was at a Toys R Us conference. Suspicious, they called the Toys R Us head office, only to learn that there was no conference. Realizing Bernie wasn't going to come to them, they tracked him down at his father's house a few days later. Bernie seemed unfazed and cooperated, providing a swab just 20 seconds after they knocked on the door. The quick DNA test results left everyone stunned. It was a match to the baseball cap and the cable. Could the man who had been so keen to help, who had shown them the cameras, and who had sat and cried with Larry's family at his funeral be his killer? They quickly headed back to interview him. Bernie dismissed the DNA on the power cord, explaining that his job involved unplugging things to reboot them. As for the baseball cap, Bernie claimed he had no idea about it. When pressed on how his DNA was on the hat, Bernie could only offer vague denials. Police offered him an out, suggesting it could have been an argument that got out of control. But Bernie insisted he was innocent, becoming increasingly panicked. Realizing the situation was deteriorating, he asked for a lawyer, ending the interview. Despite his adamant denials and no apparent motive, detectives were concerned they might be wrong. However, Bernie's life was a stark contrast to what it seemed. Everyone thought Bernie had it all: a gorgeous home, a wife, 2 children, new cars, and a great job. In reality, he was over $1 million in debt, and his wife, Heather, had kicked him out and obtained a restraining order against him. Bernie had exhibited violent and bizarre behavior, including pushing and shoving Heather and shooting a gun. He had moved out and started renting a new place with his girlfriend, filling it with brand new sealed toys and expensive electronics, all stolen from various Toys R Us stores hundreds of miles away from Hamburg. He had been selling these items on eBay, making around $200,000 so far. As part of the regional management team, accessing any store whenever he wanted was not difficult. No one saw him as a threat, given his position in security. His brazen behavior, including walking around Larry's store knowing people would be there for a delivery, showed his confidence in his scheme. They also found a memory card showing Bernie filming various Toys R Us stores with a secret camera, scouting out the stock and cameras. This discovery painted a picture of someone who had used his position to facilitate a large-scale theft operation, while maintaining a facade of respectability and helpfulness. Bernie's eventual downfall was his overconfidence and the meticulous investigation that uncovered the extent of his criminal activities. Bernard Gruszka, a 38-year-old regional manager, is being held without bail on murder charges in a case that has shocked Western New York. Gruszka, who was initially very helpful during the investigation and spent time consoling other employees, has been in jail since his arrest. Despite being on the radar from the beginning, the police had to sift through an overwhelming amount of information before finally focusing on him. Yesterday, police raided 2 homes, one in Elma where Gruszka is the owner, and another in the village of Alany where he was arrested. They collected more evidence from both locations, hoping to bring closure to the family and friends of the victim, Larry Wells. In July 2014, faced with substantial evidence, Bernard Gruszka pleaded guilty to manslaughter instead of second-degree murder. His attorney, Frank H., explained that it took time for Gruszka to come to terms with what had happened. Gruszka's wife was battling cancer, and they were struggling financially, which contributed to his actions. The decision to offer a plea to manslaughter was influenced by several factors, including the belief that Gruszka did not intend to kill and the agreement of the victim's family with the disposition. Gruszka maintained that the killing was unintentional, describing Larry Wells as collateral damage in a plan to steal from the store's safe. On the morning of the crime, Bernie pretended to force the store's door open to mislead the police. When Larry Wells entered the office, Bernie attacked him, demanding he open the safe. Larry fought back, trying to remove the scarf covering Bernie's face, which led to Bernie stabbing him 3 times before fleeing. Larry, severely injured, attempted to call for help. His colleagues described Larry as a brave individual who would protect his friends at all costs, unaware that his attacker was someone he considered a friend. At the time of the offense, Bernie was trying to support his family financially. His lawyer emphasized that Bernie did not anticipate encountering Larry and had no desire to harm him, though he was prepared to use the knife he brought. Typically, burglars avoid arming themselves to rely on stealth, unlike robbers who come armed and ready for confrontation. The judge sentenced Bernard Gruszka to the maximum of 25 years, plus 5 years probation, stating that this was the only appropriate sentence for such a senseless and heartbreaking crime. Larry Wells, known for his love of his job and family, had planned to take his daughter out for dinner and play games on the day he was killed. His death was a devastating blow to his family and friends, who struggled to understand how someone Larry trusted could betray him so severely. Matt Chandler, a local journalist, followed the case closely and supported Larry's widow Jill through her grief. Inspired by Jill's letters to Larry sent to heaven in balloons, Matt wrote a book, Balloons for Heaven, to help children cope with grief. The book, released on the first anniversary of Larry's death, featured illustrations of Larry, Jill, and their daughter Maddie, and all proceeds from its launch were donated to Jill and her daughters. Jill recounted the difficulty of the past months, especially with her daughter Maddie graduating preschool and starting kindergarten. Maddie, who wrote letters and drew pictures for her father, now has a sister named Peyton, whom Larry had wanted to name. Jill and Maddie ensure that Peyton knows about her father through stories and pictures. Maddie, who resembles Larry in both appearance and personality, keeps his memory alive. Jill expressed her profound loss, emphasizing the bond she and Larry shared and the deep love he had for their daughter. The community has been supportive, and Jill is determined to keep Larry's memory alive for their children. The community, deeply affected by the tragedy, has come together to support Jill and her daughters. The family's loss has been profound, but through the love and support of their community, they continue to honor Larry's memory and keep his spirit alive in their lives.